So hi to everyone, my name is Pablo Rodriguez Ros. I'm from south of Spain, currently working and doing my PhD in Barcelona in the Institute of Marine Sciences, which is close to Barceloneta Beach. I don't know if you have ever been there. So my research topic for my PhD is mostly focused in biogeochemistry. So biochemistry is science that involves biology, geology, and chemistry. So essentially what we do is to research what the elements of the periodic table do on the Earth, right? How hydrogen moves in the ecosystem, how carbon, how sulfur, this nitrogen too, right? So I'm here at ETH doing a research stay of 1 month. I was last year too, in order to use computer science to understand the biochemical cycles that are in the ocean, because that's what we do. We focus in the oceans. What we study is how the oceans speak with the atmosphere, right? So many of you know CO2, which is a gas which has many important effects on the atmosphere, but there are also many gases that we call trace gases because the concentration is too low that they have important roles too. So today is the World Oceans Day, and the first thing I would like to ask you is why oceans? Because actually, if we think the Earth, this is a map, right? In which the important part is not the land, it's the ocean. So how many oceans are here? So essentially just one, right? But eventually we can divide it in different oceans, and obviously every ocean has different roles. So if we want to understand how the ocean works, the global ocean as we call it, we need to understand how it works in the different parts of it, right? So it's like a puzzle that you have one piece, you know, how a process behaves in this part, how a process behaves in this part. So you put everything together and you have the whole thing. So when I was a child, I really loved exploration. I was born in Cartagena, which is a city in the south of Spain. And it's very famous because it has a lot of history. This is a Roman theater. Roman theater, one of the oldest one in the world. This is the boat, is the Hesperides research vessel, which is the polar Spanish vessel, and the base of the vessel is in my hometown. So since I was a child, I really loved exploration and science and these kind of things. So this is the first picture of the Earth taken from Apollo 8, right? That's the first picture of the Earth taken from the space from a human being. So that's the moon surface, and there is the Earth there. So as we can see, the Earth is blue. So the blue marble, I don't know if you have ever listened this famous phrase, like the blue marble from different people like Carl Sagan. But also we can see clouds. Clouds are important, right? So we can see that it's something blue, it has white, and also the continent, which is Africa. So but here, if we zoom it in the picture, I mean, we will have this view of the Earth, but this is not true. Actually, something is missing. Clouds are missing. Why clouds are important? Clouds are white. That's pretty obvious, right? When something is white, it helps you. For example, if you have to do a sport in summer, I don't know, in Switzerland, if you have really high temperatures, but you usually need to wear bright and light clothes, right? So for the Earth, it's the same. So the white part or the bright parts of the Earth help the Earth to make it cooler, right? Colder, sorry. And what is this? So many of us, we study clouds when we are children, right? Schools, high school, and usually teachers and professors told us, okay, so in order to have a cloud, you need the water. So the sunlight will hit the water on the ocean or a lake, whatever. The water will be evaporate, will go to the atmosphere, and eventually it will condense by some magic, and you will have a cloud, right? But the truth is that it's not that simple, right? So you need particles. You need small particles that are floating in the atmosphere in which the water molecules can condense, right? So these particles can be from the industry, can be from the cars, for example, from the oil combustion. Even they can be viruses. So they're flowing in the atmosphere, and the water can condense. So you have this particle, the water condenses in the particle, and after they become many of them together, so you have small cloud droplets. And eventually, if you have many small cloud droplets, you will have a cloud. So it's not that simple, right? This is the Western Sahara. This is Saharan dust, right? Which is really important for these processes. So all of this dust that goes from the desert to the ocean and up in the atmosphere help in these cloud formation processes, right? And also, this dust, just for you to know, can go from here to the Amazon rainforest and fertilize it, right? So this is something very important. Usually, so that's biochemistry, being aware that the atmosphere, the ocean, the land, and everything is quite connected somehow, right? So these are fires that also contribute to the aerosol particle budget in the atmosphere. Industry, as I said before. So the amount of energy that the Earth can reflect, right, from the sun, we call it albedo, the albedo effect, right? So the higher is the number in the bottom right, the better for us, because the temperature will be lower, right? So this is a picture. If we take out all the clouds, if we take them out, all of them, so we will have the albedo from the deserts, which are quite bright too, from the polar regions, the ocean, and the albedo from the ocean, which is, so we can say that it's negative, right? Because it's pretty dark. So we have an albedo effect factor of 0.15, but if we include clouds, it's the double of it. So essentially, clouds are really important. So I told you that the dust and the particles from the industry, they go to the atmosphere, also from the deserts, but even living beings like plants, they can release their own particles, right? Or gases that when they are oxidized in the atmosphere, when reacting with other compounds, come from particles. Also sea ice, also sea salt. So eventually, if you put all of this on this is a simulation, obviously, but you can see that in the atmosphere, the way this particle travels around the world is pretty amazing, right? And why we study that? So most of us, we know about climate change. That's in Spanish, but it doesn't matter. So we all know that temperature will increase by the end of the 21st century, but it depends on the way we will emit. If we emit more CO2, less CO2, if we change land uses or not, in many things. But anyway, even if we reduce everything, even if we stop, temperature is going to increase, right? But the problem is that how much? That's the key question. So we have different scenarios, and the temperature, in the more optimistic, in the most optimistic scenario, temperature can increase by the end of the century 0.3, and in the worst one up to 5, right? And why is that? Well, first, because of the scenarios, right? But second, because there are many processes that we don't know well yet, right? So if you see the error bars, so essentially the aerosol, which are the particles I was telling you before, and the aerosol cloud interaction, aerosol irradiation, they contribute with the highest error to the total anthropogenic forcing on climate, right? So when I work with my PhD is with the cloud hypothesis. So the cloud hypothesis is something. It's an hypothesis. It's not something that real. It's not something that it is a fact, and you will see. So the sun, hits the surface of the ocean warms, right? And since the ocean warms, the phytoplankton will grow because living beings are happy when the temperature is high, right? Not much higher, but they're quite happy. When they're quite happy, they began to release some of these trace gases, some of these compounds like DMS, dimethyl sulfide, right? These trace gases, they go to the atmosphere, right? And they react with sulfur and they increase the concentration of some compounds that eventually will become particles, right? Which help to create clouds. So essentially, it's like the microorganisms are able to react to the warmth of the waters and create like an umbrella for them, right? This is not something, I mean, let's say true, because obviously microorganisms, they cannot think, right? They don't do that in purpose. But essentially, this is a reaction which has been confirmed in many places. Eventually, like everything in science, things are much complex. Things are much more complex than that, right? So we have these trace gases, which are essentially gases produced by the pelagic ecosystem, which are the organisms living in the surface, right? But also we have other kind of aerosols, like when the waves, for example, when they break, right, they release some sea salt particles that go to the atmosphere too. So it's such a complex thing, right? And this is the thing that is contributing more to the uncertainty level in climate change projections for the end of the century. So this is an ideal representation of the Southern Ocean, the Antarctic Ocean, right? So you can see there are penguins, you can see seals, you can see the famous krill over there, right? You see the krill. So what I do for my PhD is study this part of here. Obviously, the sizes are not real, right? So this is like a microorganism, and this organism can be 1 millimeter, right? So this is not real. So you can see there this purple stuff going from the ocean to the atmosphere. These are trace gases that when we study that eventually they become particles and they will help in cloud formation processes. But also they are like signals for some animals like seagulls. So when a seagull is flying, right, they don't see what is below the water. Obviously, if there is something big like a whale, they see it. But if they want to prey krill, they don't usually see the krill when they're flying, but they can smell it, right? So these trace gases are not only important because they help in the cloud formation process, but also they are important chemical signals for animals. If we think in the ocean, we all have seen documentaries, right? And we usually tend to think that the ocean is something which is full of whales, dolphins, penguins jumping, but actually the ocean is mostly empty of these big animals, right? Mostly formed by bacteria, by microbes. So the ocean is essentially a microbial soup. So this is the number of bacteria in the ocean, which is 1 followed by 13 zeros. I was telling you about gases. So this is the trace gas I studied for my PhD, which is called isoprene. And it's a trace gas which is produced inside every cell on the Earth doing photosynthesis. Every cell on the Earth that has plastids, right? Which are the organs where photosynthesis is produced, right? But it's mostly produced by land plants rather than phytoplankton, which are the microbial organisms living in the ocean that are able to do photosynthesis, right? And you may think, why is it important? Well, because the lifetime in the atmosphere of these trace gases is really low, really low. So they have not enough time to travel from one continent to another, like the Saharan dust, right? So the lifetime is from 2 to 3 hours. So when isoprene is released in the ocean, it reacts immediately in this area or in a really close area, right? So the clouds that are formed there, they came from this. They are produced by these trace gases. So that's the importance of studying these trace gases in the ocean. And also because the ones that are emitted in land, they are interacting with some anthropogenic gases and particles from industry and these kind of things. So these are some of the organisms that living in the surface ocean, and they do the photosynthesis and they release these compounds. The top right of the picture, you can see Prochlorococcus. Prochlorococcus is a bacterioplankton, which is a bacteria that is able to perform photosynthesis, right? And this organism was discovered by the MIT in the late 80s, in early 90s. So when I was born, this organism didn't even exist. Well, it exists, but we didn't know it, right? So this is the most abundant organism on Earth. And this is the most abundant organism able to do the photosynthesis. And actually, according to some estimates, from the 20% or from the, let's say 15%, 25% of the oxygen we are breathing here, it has been produced by this organism. And 28 years ago, 27 years ago, we didn't even know that this organism existed. So the ocean is something that we have many things to discover still. And what I do, so I use mathematical models and physical models. This is a model from ET8 from my collaborators, and here you can see the ocean currents, how they change during on every season. So you can see that some parts are dark, which means that the speed is really high, right? So you can see that the Southern Ocean, this is the Southern Ocean, right? I mean, it's not something like a calm sea, something really complex. It's like, it has like rivers flowing inside, right? So this is the biology. So this is the way this microorganism called phytoplankton, they're able to do photosynthesis, change through the year. You can see the spring arrives and they bloom, and they bloom in the ocean. So the emission of these trace gases in these seasons is higher. But well, so we have this model, which is like a physical model, right? But we also need to know how the marine ecosystem works, right? So we have that's like on land. So you have the primary producers, you have the consumers, you have the predators, right? So you have nutrients. You need to know which is the amount of nutrients they have in the Southern Ocean, for example. How many species or producers you want, how many species or predators you want. So, and this is here, it looks really simple, but eventually this is a really big branch of equations, including one model. So what we do here, what I'm doing here for my PhD is just putting all of this together. So we have the physical framework with the currents, the production, whatever. So we have the ecosystem diagram, let's say. We know how the microbial ecosystem works in the Southern Ocean. And we also know which amount of these trace gases are emitted by every cell. And eventually, if we put all of this together, so we can estimate, for example, the emission of isoprene in the whole Southern Ocean, right? But well, this is the modeling part. This is, let's say, the mathematical part, but we need data. And if we need data, we need to travel really far, and we need to do oceanographic cruises, oceanographic expeditions. So these are the views from my cabin. So I used to be living inside here like 2 months. This cruise in the English Channel when we were sailing from one cruise from Germany to South Africa. So the first cruise I participate in order to measure these compounds and see how they are released in the ocean was this one, Transpegaso, in 2014. We start in Spain and we arrive to South America. This is sailing in the Atlantic Ocean. You have massive waves. You have to be there like 1 month working. Everyone gets dizzy. So everyone gets dizzy. I mean, some people say, no, I don't. Everyone at some point gets dizzy. But what if you want to go to the Southern Ocean? So this is South America and the Antarctic Peninsula. You can see this here, that's the Weddell Sea. So if you want to reach the Southern Ocean, you need to cross the Drake Passage, right? The Drake Passage is the most dangerous place in the world for sailing. I don't know if you like sailing, but if you see these boat races that every year when they have to cross through there, it's a total mess. For us, it's easier because our boats are bigger. They are vessels, they are not boats. They are not sailing boats at all, so it's very easy. But the point is that you have a belt of storms coming every 3 days. And the time that the storms is there is 3 days too. And the time you have to spend in order to go from South America to Antarctica is 3 days to an average. So the point is that you have to be there waiting until one storm is going. That's the moment you start with the boat trying to reach Antarctica before a new storm will arrive, right? It's a pretty difficult place to be. So we performed this cruise, which is called Pegaso. We went to this area in the Southern Ocean, so that's South America, the Antarctic Peninsula. We have a penguin which was really happy with us, and he jumped into the Zodiac. So we went with this research vessel, and here you have the proof that this is true. The penguin jumped there. Look at us. It's just curious. So there, usually, depending on the place you go on Antarctica, usually animals are not really used to human beings, right? So they don't respect you. So even a penguin, which is like, it's like a pigeon there. It's like a seagull. It's like one of the. It's an animal that is preyed by most of the rest of the others. They don't even care about you. They jump there when they're bored. They jump out. So this is how it looks when you are crossing the Drake Passage, right, from South America to Antarctica. This is the people. We were there working together. So how we work there? So we sample in many different ways. So this one is for sampling the micro layers, the microsurface layer of the ocean. So essentially, we introduce one plate of glass, and the most surface layer of the ocean got stick on it. And after we clean it like this, and we get these drops in this bottle. In order to fill this bottle, we need to spend like 1 hour there. So this is from a zodiac, right? So we have small boats inside the big boat that we use for going sampling over there. So you can see in the background an ice layer. We also use this instrument, which is called rosette, CTD rosette. This is the most iconic instrument in ocean sciences, right? So you can see there, it looks like, well, essentially you have, all of these are bottles, right? And every bottle has a number. So you deploy this instrument and you deploy it until the bottom of the sea or until the depth you want, right? When it's going down, it's measuring, right? When it's going down, it's measuring temperature, it measures fluorimetry, it measures salinity, it measures depth. So you can see how it looks the ocean, how is the vertical profiles or of the main properties of the ocean, let's say. And when you recover it and it's going up, you can tell from the boat to every bottle, so open at this depth. You can tell the bottle number 6, so you will be open at the depth of 400 meters. So on the bottle number 5 to 100 meters, whatever. When you got it back on the boat and you put it here, you have different bottles, and every bottle has the water from a different depth, which is a smart way of sampling, rather than going with a submarine or these kind of things which are really expensive. So that's the way we usually pick the water from the deep ocean. We don't go in submarines or we don't dive there. So we use this kind of instrument which has been used during the last decades. We also perform experiments on board. So these containers there, they have water pumping from the ocean directly. So in order to keep the same temperature in the ocean than in these boxes, let's say, and there we have small bottles with different phytoplankton communities there, and we see how they react with the light or in dark conditions. With all the hypotheses you want to test. We also pick ice. That's me picking some ice. And why we pick ice with an axe? Because, I mean, you can see here in this picture, this is not dirty ice, right? It's because inside the ice, there are living beings too. So inside the ice, we have phytoplankton too, and they live there, right? So, and it's such an important thing because actually, krill usually eat this phytoplankton. They go below the ice and they scratch it. So these are some of the organisms that we found inside the ice. So essentially it's full of living beings. We participate also in the Ace Maritime University, which was a cruise was started in Bremerhaven, Germany, until South Africa. That was a cruise that we were scientists working there, but also 50 students from all over the world. And we saw many things like flying fishes. I don't know if you have ever seen them. And we were on the academic Tresnikov research vessel. This project was funded by the Swiss Polar Institute, which is run by the Swiss government, ETA, GPFL, other institutions from Switzerland. So this is how our lab looked like. right? We were setting up the lab in that moment. So you can see there the rosette, the instrument I told you. It's quite claustrophobic, everything, right? So it's pretty small, no windows, many things around you, many bottles and cables. And obviously the funniest thing is you are on a vessel, so everything moves, right? So you have to tie everything to the walls. Even the chairs they're tied to the floor, right? So everything cannot be, everything has to be really stable, because if you have a storm, literally chairs, for example, they can be blow up and they can be flying over the rooms. So last year we participated in, 2 years ago, last year actually, in ACE expedition. That was a cruise starting from Africa, but after we went to Hobart in Australia, Punta Arenas in South America and Africa again. So it was the whole circumnavigation of Antarctica, which was the first time that an international expedition has done it on history, right? An international one with a scientific aim, right? So we saw flying squids. I don't know if you knew that we have flying fishes on the ocean, but also flying squids. I have to recognize that I didn't know it until that moment, but they exist. So we saw many king penguins. That king penguin, which is the second biggest one after the emperor penguin. Many microorganisms in which we are interested. So the expedition was divided in 3 different legs, and every leg was more or less 1 month, right? And I participated in the first one. So this is some pictures. This is a king penguin. This is many of them together, having baby penguins and everything. So I even saw how one of them was killed by these skuas and other seagulls from the Southern Ocean. So you can see there the penguin in the bottom, that's a dead penguin. So it's like real documentary, something like a documentary actually. This one movie I will show you some of it. When we were starting from Cape Town, so that's the boat, so we were there. So you can see that usually it's really cloudy, the weather is not good. So if you see documentaries with penguins and sun, that's not the normal thing there. Usually you have really bad weather. That's how we work. So in the same place, we have lunch, we have dinner, so we have the meetings, because actually you don't have many saloons on a boat, so the space is really tight. All the kind of things we were doing on this cruise. So these people, they were launching balloons. These balloons are used to measure the properties of the atmosphere, for example. Deploying many different instruments. What is this? So when I show these pictures to high school students, they told me, well, this is, I don't know, this is Saturn or Jupiter or another planet. So this is the Pacific Ocean. So if you use, and obviously you do use Google Earth, and you swipe it. If you look back, so you will find this. The Pacific Ocean is massive. Something that big that you can put all the continents, all the land inside the Pacific Ocean, and after that you will even have a little bit of Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean is really big. And as you can see, there are clouds there. So what we have done this year, we went to this point in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, which is Moorea Island in the French Polynesia. I don't know if you know where is Tahiti. So close to Tahiti, there is Moorea Island. So we were there in order to study this trace gases emission by marine microbes, but not only marine microbes, but also from coral reefs. Because coral reefs, they have in coral reefs ecosystem, they can have different behaviors, and it's quite interesting. So if eventually, as I told you in the beginning, so you need to understand the ocean as a puzzle. So you need to know how these processes are in every part of the ocean. So that's Moorea Island. We were there. This is the island. It's pretty cool. So we were living here on these houses on the mountain. But it was really beautiful at night. And this is unreal. I mean, this kind of, I mean, when you came from the Southern Ocean and you arrive to a tropical island like this, it's really funny because it's like living in an aquarium. And every time you dive, it's like you cannot believe what you are saying because it's like fake, but it's not fake. It's full of corals and everything. So this is the research team. We were there. We were just 13 people from 4 different countries. From New York, from the States, from China, from Australia, from Spain, from France too. And this is the boat we used on that cruise. Well, it wasn't a cruise. We were working from an island, right? So every day we took the boat and we went sampling. And this is for example, in this picture, what we are doing is deploying this radiometer, which is an instrument that you can use for measure how are the properties of the light below the surface water. So how lights decay with the depth, for example, which is an indicator of the turbidity and these kind of things. And that's me working on the boat. So you have to, he's the driver of the boat, Tony, and I used to spend many hours close to his feet working there with all the so essentially it's like you have like really fancy instruments, really expensive things, but eventually you need to adapt to the circumstances. So what we were doing, I mean, when we went with the boat sampling, for example, in Morea Island, the pictures from the right. So we saw how, this is in green you have the chlorophyll, which is an indicator of the productivity of a community or the water, let's say. So we saw that in the base the productivity was higher than out of the reef and inside the reef. So that's the things we usually do. And we went to this small atoll in the north, which is Teperoa. Here you have the bigger picture. So an atoll is not, I mean, this atoll was really different than Morea, right? It has inside a lagoon, and in the lagoon the productivity was really high, was much higher than out of the island, which was something really surprising for us. So the last thing I would like to tell you is about science and society, right? So these kind of things are very important, and you have to explain them to the people. You have to explain them to society. So this is Malaspina expedition, right? That was an expedition performed in the 19th century by Spain. That was the first scientific expedition around the world sampling living creatures from islands and many different things. So in 2010, so 8 years ago, there was the Malaspina expedition, which was a cruise sailing around the ocean, right? Again, by the Spanish government, which is something really cool. So you have a massive boat full of scientists traveling around the world during 7 months, which is something that you may think, well, this is so easy to outreach. This is so easy to engage with the people. And in that moment, I was on my bachelor, and I used to read the blog. And that was the blog. So here you have, I mean, you don't even have to read it, but so no pictures, no movies, no nothing. So you have people sailing around the globe doing really cool science, and you present it like this. And actually, the author of this writing is one of the most famous Spanish writers. You have on the boat one of the best Spanish writers in the world, and you are doing really cool things, and you present it like this with no social media, no Twitter, no Facebook, no nothing. So eventually, no one, or really few people, is going to read this, unless you are a freak like me. So, but if you want to engage, these people, millennials, my generation and the younger ones, you need to use social media. I created with my partner this blog in September 2014 in order to explain this and to explain and outreach the expeditions I told you before I was involved. Focusing on storytelling, adventure, and the challenges of science, and outreaching directly from the scientists to the public, or I'm mostly focusing in young people. So we have written posts in all of these different places on the world, which is quite cool in 4 years. this is what I wanted to tell you. Thank you. And if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer.
What kind of results did you get from all these experiments?
So on every ocean is different. On every experiment is different. So the results we have got is that depending on the phytoplankton species. So because you may think, well, if this trace gas is related to chlorophyll, so chlorophyll is a molecule which is the same, no matter the organism, the molecule is the same. So you may think, so maybe we can link the production of this gas just to chlorophyll. But actually it doesn't work like that. So depending on the species, even no matter of the chlorophyll, of the level of chlorophyll of the species, so the emission can be different of these trace gases. So that is one thing we have found. Yeah.
Actually, I have a question from one of the people who's not in this room. He's thinking more towards the global warming model. So he says that every time our CEO and our higher ups talk about machine learning, he talks about the example of climate change modeling. And he's asking if you're aware of machine learning initiatives to improve these models, because it seems like climate modeling within 150 years of data is still a good candidate for applying machine learning to such research. So what's kind of your view or experience in this direction?
Well, actually, what I do with the models I use, I mean, I'm not a model developer, I'm a model user, right? So, and actually my intention with these models here is not, I mean, the final goal of this obviously is to help the people to project the climate, but it's not my actual goal, right? But I am aware that now they're using these machine learning things for increase the quality of the models, and also quantum computing too. So yeah, something that is a hot topic now, but currently, I mean, that's not my goal, so I have no expertise in that. Yeah.
The talk was really enjoyable. I'm wondering, on your whole research team, how many people go out into the field and gather data, and how many people stay home and write code and run models? And how's the interaction between you? Because I'm considering being one of the latter.
Well, it depends on the cruise, right? For example, in one of the cruises, the one that we did in this oceanographic vessel, I'm gonna make it like this. That's the Spanish vessel, so we have like 35 berths for us. So we were like 30 scientists working. So the people that do modeling stuff, these kind of things, usually they stay on land, but sometimes not, right? Like me. So for example, in this cruise, we were 30 scientists. In the cruise that we did around Antarctica, from my research group, we just got 2 places. So we were just 2 Spanish people there, and we were, shooting each other every month. So it depends on the cruise. And on the island, this month of April, we were 13 people. So yeah, it depends on the. Also, it depends. Obviously, the more people you have, the better, because you can do more things and you can have more data. But essentially, it's something that you need to. I mean, it's a kind of science that is quite complex, because essentially you have to take your lab and move it from a. Essentially, we take our lab and we put it inside a boat, and the boat is never in Barcelona, so we have to go to Germany or to whatever, and you need to take all of our instruments there. We put in a boat, and boat sails around the world, and after you pick them up. So it's such a complex thing. What I want to say is that that's expensive too. So the more people, the better, but the more people, the more expensive it is. So essentially, you need to think, and you need to have clearly in your mind what I want to do. Is these people enough? You're not. So you usually try to keep the number of people as lower as possible, and I mean that will help you to have your scientific goals. Yeah.
So you mentioned different types of photosynthesis has different behaviors which can affect like the amount of byproduct it produces, and you also mentioned, the by net amount, cyanobacteria, phytoplankton, stuff in the ocean produces way more, at least in terms of oxygen, than plants.
Well, it's mostly because the size of the animals, of the plants, right? So the bigger is a plant. This is producing isoprene right now. Can be producing it. So the bigger it is, obviously, the more it produces. It's the same way if you breathe, you are releasing more CO2 than a mouse. Right? So it's something similar to that. So you have more biomass on land. You have more photosynthetic biomass on land than in the ocean. But the point is that the biomass in the ocean, so it becomes recycled faster, because they are essentially microbes, right? And they die, but they can divide themselves. So you have two of them, you have three. So the biomass is lower than in land plants. Yeah, so that's the reason. You're welcome. That one, no, I did. Did I include the site? I don't think. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's my Twitter user. If you mean, yeah. Okay. Well, it's the same, by the way. So, yeah.
So you said that based on plants release more isoprene because they are more. Why is it not the same with oxygen? You said that the oxygen is mostly released by these microbes.
Well, because that's a really good question. Because actually, usually in land ecosystems, right? The plants the plants they do photosynthesis, but they also they breathe. Let's say they also consume oxygen sometimes, right? So when you have an ecosystem which is mature, right, like at the rainforest, they are producing a lot of oxygen, but they are consuming a lot of oxygen too. So essentially, your balance is like some parts of the land ecosystem is zero. So, but in the ocean, these organisms are dying and living again and blah blah blah. So it's quite that's a different thing if you compare it. Yeah.
I sailed through a tall ship through the Drake's Passage half a year ago, and yeah, it was really bad. I wanted to comment on your comment that like research vessels, like the one that I was on, who could use, let's say, money for like keeping the business up and running. They also collect samples. Like we used to measure, part of our daily chores was to measure the water temperature and sometimes take samples. And this data is reported to some other agencies. I don't remember exactly where, in exchange for a small amount of money. And my understanding was that this kind of research feeds, this kind of small samples data feeds into like larger research at a global level. And there are other boats like this that you can volunteer on, or you can just join them for, I don't know, 5 weeks from Cape Town to the Azores, or I went from Ushuaia to Antarctic Peninsula and back. It was 22 days, or the same Ushuaia, Antarctic Peninsula, Georgian Islands, and Cape Town. And we collected this sort of samples every 8 hours, come whatever kind of weather and dizziness and so on. So I think there's maybe opportunity, if you're interested, to look into what kind of research this data ends up being used for, and if there's some sort of more intelligent machine learning and things that we could, or one could contribute, if there's interest. Have some sort of website like that, and probably that was fancy.
eventually you can join some research cruise, but actually in order to, that was something that has been doing like during the last decades, like, yeah, just launching vessels and people going there measuring, after sharing everything, put everything together. Now the trend, the thing that is quite trendy is the Argo float. I don't know if you have ever listened about Argo floats. So essentially they are buoys, right? Like these ones. So you have these buoys floating in the ocean. They go down and they send the data to satellites, and they are not simply floating. They go deeper and they go up afterwards. So the Argo float, are all the Argo buoys that are in the ocean, which is this in February 2018, right? So the ocean has many of these Argo floats. Usually, almost every country, they have a group in charge of deploying the Argo floats. You essentially deploy them, and when they are run out of battery, so you pick them up and you repair it and you launch it again, which is something which is cheaper than send people, is safer too, because if a buoy becomes broken, no one dies. So, yeah. Sure.
Okay, so it says you are studying what looks like a positive feedback loops towards global warming. Any chances it can offset the major negative feedback loops like albedo loss from ice melting, sea acidity decreasing CO2 storage, permafrost melting releases CH4, and so on?
What is that with climate change usually? Because we usually tend to understand climate change as global warming, because actually it is. Now it's global warming. But if you have a really high global warming, you even can end in a glacial period, right? So something quite tricky. For example, if for example, like he or she was saying, if the ice melts in the Arctic, for example, so the temperature of that ocean will be higher. And I don't know if you are aware that the heating machine of the Earth are the oceans. Essentially, you have a convection belt through the oceans, which is called the thermohaline circulation. Essentially it's like a river which is flowing from one place to another one, transporting heat, right? So if the ocean, for example, if the Arctic, we are in Switzerland, but I don't know if you know that Madrid, for example, has the same, it is more or less in the same latitude than New York, but the temperature is totally different. So in New York, you have seen movies, right? And it's, Christmas, everything is full of snow, and usually in Spain we don't have that, or in Lisbon, which is in the same latitude too. That is because in the North Atlantic Ocean, we have this convection belt of water, which is called the AMOC, which is the Antarctic Meridional Overturning Circulation. So the warm waters that are that they are warm because the sun in the equator hits the water. That water flows north and flows south to the Southern Ocean, to the Arctic Ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean, right? When they arrive to the North Pole or the Arctic, they get colder, right? And if they are colder, they go down, right? So, and if they go down after they are doing the way back but below, right? And this has an atmospheric link too. So essentially we have these warm temperatures in Europe rather than in America because of this circulation. But if the Arctic is warmer, this circulation, the AMOC, can be broken or can be or even if that circulation is slower, it can really change the whole climate of Europe, and it will be colder. So eventually, if you have a lot of global warming, you can have not a glacial period, or maybe a glacial period, but much lower temperatures in places that you have never had. Well, we have never had in the last millenniums. Yeah. it's such a tricky thing. Thanks to you.